Hey, Algebra 2. Today we're looking at problem set 9, which we are looking a little more with some percent, and we're going to set up percent word problems. Now, in a previous lesson we talked about these percent problems, and we had these two equations. Percent times of equals is, and is over of equals percent over 100. Okay, those will still work, but on these word problems where it's a little more of a situation where you're talking about specific things, my opinion, it's a little bit easier if we set up a table on these problems. And those tables, I think we've done some in class, kind of like the ratio boxes, where we have 3 rows, 2 columns, 1 column for percent, 1 column for the actual numbers. Okay, so I'm going to work a few examples here, and I'm going to set these up with tables, and I'll kind of talk you through how we set these up, and hopefully you'll get the hang of it, and it will work pretty easy. So this first example, 60% of those present at the performance were neophytes. If you don't know what a neophyte is, look it up. If 200 present were not neophytes, how many people attended the performance? So we have 60% of those present were neophytes. So here's my table. I'm going to set up 3 rows. My categories on this problem. We have some were neophytes, some were not, and then we have our total. So I'm going to label this neophytes. I'm going to abbreviate neo. And the middle row is our nots. And the last row will be our total. Okay, we have a percent column and we have a number column. When we set up these tables on the percent side, somewhere on that percent side, we have to have 100%. Okay, so you need to think, where does it go? Almost always it's going to be the total. That's 100% of the people at the performance. Okay, now we look at our problem and we're going to pull out the stuff that we know. We know 60% of those present were neophytes. So I'm going to put 60% in the neophytes. So that leaves how much for the nots? Well, they have to total up to be 100%, which means that needs to be 40. Okay? Now we look for the actual numbers. If 200 present were not neophytes, how many people attended the performance? So 200 were not neophytes. The biggest challenge on this is making sure we get the numbers in the right box. So make sure we put it in the correct place. So 200 were not. So 200 nots. And we want to know how many people attended the performance. That is referring to our total. Okay, now we've done a lot of these ratio boxes in the past. Maybe you did more last year in Algebra 1, but from here we get a proportion. I need the row that has the X, and I need the row that has 2 numbers. So the neophytes I can get rid of. I look at what's left, and the stuff that's left in these 4 boxes gives me a proportion to solve. I have 40 over 100 equals 200 over X. From here, we cross multiply and solve for X. Okay, when I cross multiply, that's 40X equals 2,000. And now simply divide by 40. And we should get 500. So when we look at this problem, when we solve for X, that was our total. So there were 500 people that attended the performance. Okay, let's try a couple more. Here's our next problem. This book picks some crazy names and characters for our word problems, so you just got to go with it. We have wood nymphs and the maids gambled and frolicked before the banquet began. If 70% of those present were wood nymphs and 120 maids were present, how many wood nymphs came to the banquet? So, again, we have some categories. We're going to set up our table, 3 rows, 2 columns, percent and number. So we look at this and we got to decide what are the categories. Well, we got some wood nymphs. Again, I'm going to abbreviate, call that wood nymphs. And then the second category would be the maids. And then the last row, this is our total, once again. All right, so now we plug in the stuff that we know. Again, on the percent side, somewhere is 100%. This one we're talking about a total again, so we have 100% total at the banquet, okay? Now, what else do we know? It said 70% of those present were wood nymphs. So 70% for the wood nymphs. That leaves 30% for the maids. Now, we look at the actual numbers that we know. It says 120 maids were present. Make sure that goes in the right spot. And then, what are they asking us to find? It says how many wood nymphs came to the banquet. So this problem, we're looking for the number of wood nymphs. Again, the challenge is make sure you get the X in the right spot and all the numbers in the right boxes. Because if you get one of those messed up, then the whole problem is off. Okay, for this problem, we don't need the total, but the 4 boxes remaining is my proportion. 70 over 30 equals X over 120. And once again, we cross multiply. We get 30X equals, I believe that's 8,400. Divide by 30. And we get 280. Now that would be the number of wood nymphs at the banquet. So 280 wood nymphs. I hate that word. It's hard to say. Okay, moving on. Try this again. All right. This one's a little bit different. Okay? Every now and then they're going to mix in problems that talk about a percent increase or a percent decrease. Let's look at this problem. It says the production increased by 140%. If we stop right there, anytime you see increased by a percent, we are going to set up a table, but the table is set up slightly different. Okay? On our table, we still have 3 rows, percent and number, but on the percent column, when it's a percent increase problem, we're going to start with our original amount. That's kind of like your before number. Then the middle row is either your increase or we'll see some decrease problems where maybe it's a sale price and it's marked down some percent. Okay? So the middle row is your increase or decrease, and the bottom row is your new, or the amount after the increase. Okay? When we have a percent increase problem, the original percent will be our 100. That's your starting amount. Now, this says production increased by 145%. So 145% is our percent increase. So we have our original 100%, we have our 145% increase, and we need to add those together. Since it's an increase, we're going to add those together, and the new amount is 245%. Okay? So original is 100, then you have your percent increase, and you add those together to get the new. All right, it says if the number of widgets produced this year was 171,500, how many were produced last year? So this 171,500, we need to make sure we get it in the right spot. So is that talking about our original amount, the before amount? Is that the amount of increase, or is it the new amount after the increase? Since it's talking about this year and the question asks about last year, the newest one, the most recent, is your new. So the 171,500 needs to go down here. And we want to know what was it before. So what was the original amount? So we're looking for that box. Okay, we no longer need the increase. So we set up our proportion and we're ready to go. So 100 over 245 equals X over 171,500. All right, here we go, cross multiply. 245x equals 1. Divide by 245. And we should get 7,000. So that would be the number originally produced in the previous year. Okay? So 7,000 widgets. All right, so the table hopefully is a good tool for you to set things up. Make sure you get things in the correct boxes though. That's the biggest challenge and the biggest mistakes is getting the X in the wrong spot or a number in the wrong box. So be very careful with that. Again, on the percent side, somewhere has to be 100%. When it's a percent increase or decrease, that's your 100% is always your original. On the other problems where you have categories and it's talking about a total, then that total is your 100%. Okay? This is lesson 9. Good luck.